new leadership paradigm uh, framework that I'm working on and developing, and pretty good ways down the road on it. It's called friction zone management. I believe this is going to be a game changer for how to build winning teams. Of course, our three pillars are empowering better people, stronger teams, and championship cultures. And I believe that this is absolutely a game changer. And you may be asking the question, well, what's a friction zone? A friction zone is a predictable, repeatable area of tension, and it's caused by the differences in how people think, work, lead, communicate, based on their life experiences, what they've gone through. This is really evident in circumstances and situations like when you have a multi generational team, how the boomers see things versus how Gen X sees it, how Gen X sees it versus how Gen Zers see it, and the conflict that arises from that. And many times there's a bunch of different friction zones, but the majority of the friction zones that exist out there kind of fall into three categories: people, processes, and technology. And of course, like I said, there's a lot more. Like I identify innovation as a friction zone, production, how people judge work ethic as a friction zone, communication is a friction zone, how you use communication and what method that you do. And a lot of times they'll all fall back into people, processes, and technology. I call that the big three. But either way, that is what we're talking about today. Let me give you just a few more details around it. When you look at these friction zones, it's your responsibility to manage them. And how do you manage them? First of all, you have to think about how do you identify them. Think of friction zones much like you do the borders of a country, where these different philosophies come together. That's called a border. So when you have five generations, for instance, that's like having five different countries, and their borders exist, much like a country border. It's an imaginary line, but within each one of those borders, there is different languages, different values, different assumptions, a different culture, much like you would have when you look at the different uh, generational differences between all the way from traditionalists down to Gen Zers. So as you're managing this, you have to understand it's almost like managing an international alliance. Think of NATO or the European Union that you're dealing with. So that's where so many people go awry when they don't recognize those friction zones. Most traditional team building focuses on things like behavioral analysis, DISC, strength finders, things like that. And all of those tools are helpful when you're managing differences, but friction zone are real life, real world when the rubber meets the road. So when you're managing friction zone, it goes beyond behavioral assessment. It looks at what's really happening in the behavior, in action, in real world, in context, in leadership environments. Um, I like to say teams don't break down because of who people are. They break down because no one is managing who they are together. Let me say that again. Teams don't break down because of who people are on that team. They break down because no one is managing who they are together. According to MIT's Sloan Management Review, the number one predictor of team performance is not IQ or EQ, it's psychological safety and clarity of expectations. And I'll teach on that psychological safety at a later point. But both of these are cultivated through friction zone management. So what do we need to do? We need to take action when we see these friction zones, because to me, friction zones happen before conflict. Conflict is when friction zones have been allowed to rub and create that tension and explode. So if you can learn to identify friction zones, manage friction zones, it cuts down on the conflict. Conflict demands that it be resolved. Friction zones demand and deserve to be led through. So I'm going to continue to teach on this. Like I said, it's a new concept, but I believe that if you learn to manage friction zones, create a policy, process, system around those friction zones, because they are not going away. Friction is normal, but how you manage that friction will determine your success, and it will eliminate the need for conflict resolution if managed correctly. But when it's left unmanaged, trust erodes. Minor differences grow into major rifts, performance dips, people check out or they leave. But when you manage friction zones, you stop the conflict before it starts. So, in closing, manage the zone, and you'll rarely need to manage the blow up. I'm Martin Houston. And the next time we talk, hopefully, I'll be able to share a little bit more with you about good friction. Understand friction can be bad, but friction can also be good. And good friction is based on the concept of iron sharpens iron. So that's why you want to eliminate and resolve conflict, but you want to manage friction, because friction can be a good thing and cause you to get better if managed correctly. I'm Martin Houston. Go to martinhouston.org/book me if you'd like to learn more about this. We can have a one-on-one. And remember this: every single organization has they have friction zones, and there's a whole list that impacts every industry, and then you yourself, based on your industry, whether it's sports teams, corporations, nonprofits, churches, families, etc., you will have something I call wild card zones. We'll talk about those next time. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.